The alert klaxons aboard the collective defense station Aegis 7 had been silent for 3 standard cycles. Commander Zirek stood at the command center's viewport, her crystalline form refracting the light of Proxima Centauri into dancing patterns across the battle-scarred walls. The silence worried her more than any alarm ever could. The holographic display behind her painted the room in a soft blue glow, showing the positions of the remaining collective forces. Too few ships, too few stations, too few defenders. The swarm had pushed them back across 12 systems, consuming everything in their path. Now only Proxima remained, the last bastion before the inner worlds. Status report, Zirek commanded, her voice resonating through the crystalline communication matrix that connected the station's crew. First Officer Nembri's response came immediately, his own crystal structure vibrating in harmonic resonance. Perimeter sensors detect no swarm activity within range. Defense grid at 63% capacity. Remaining fleet elements report ready status, FA. He hesitated, his color shifting to a deeper blue. Speak freely, First Officer. The Valiant's reactor is showing signs of strain. Engineer Kalen estimates 3 days at combat power maximum. Zirek absorbed this information, her outer facets dimming slightly. The Valiant was their last capital ship, a stellar-class defender that had survived 17 engagements with the swarm. Like everything else under her command, it was being held together by determination and improvised repairs. Lieutenant Eriks, any word from Central Command? The communications officer's crystal matrix pulsed with nervous energy. Last transmission was 48 hours ago, Commander. Still the same message. Hold position. Reinforcements delayed. Survival of the collective depends on Proxima. The same message they'd been receiving for the past month. Zirek had stopped believing in reinforcements 2 weeks ago, around the same time they lost contact with the Rigel sector. The collective, for all its technological advancement and unity of purpose, was losing this war. A sudden ping from the sensor array drew everyone's attention. Sensor Chief Vixta's crystalline form immediately shifted to alert coloration. Commander, detecting unusual quantum signatures at the system's edge. Pattern doesn't match known swarm configurations. Show me. The main display shifted, zooming in on the detection point. The energy signature was unlike anything Zirek had seen in her 3 centuries of service. It pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, yet carried the hallmarks of artificial manipulation. Analysis. Vixta's response carried undertones of confusion. Energy patterns suggest some form of faster-than-light travel, but the method is primitive, incredibly inefficient by our standards. Yet, another ping interrupted her. Secondary signatures detected. Multiple sources, same pattern. Before Zirek could respond, the emergency frequencies erupted with activity. The silence that had worried her was suddenly replaced by something far worse. Swarm vessels detected. Vixta's voice rose an octave. Massive emergence event at coordinates 37 Mark 219. Count exceeding 300 capital ships. The holographic display blazed with red warning indicators as more and more swarm ships materialized. Their biological vessels, looking like a nightmarish fusion of organic matter and crystalline technology, began moving into attack formation the moment they entered real space. All hands to battle stations, Zirek commanded, her voice carrying through every crystal matrix on the station. This is not a drill. I repeat, all hands to battle stations. The Aegis 7 came alive with activity. Shield generators hummed to full power, weapon systems charged, and repair crews moved to their designated positions. Through it all, Zirek maintained her position at the viewport, watching as her small fleet moved to intercept the approaching armada. Commander, Nemri spoke up, his tone grave. Initial analysis suggests this is their largest force concentration yet. They're committing everything to this attack. Of course they are, Zirek replied, her outer facets hardening with resolve. We've held them here too long. We've forced them to reveal their full strength. She turned to face her crew, her crystalline form now glowing with battle-ready intensity. And that's exactly what we wanted. The confused looks from her bridge crew prompted her to continue. Think about it. Every day we've held this position has been another day for the inner worlds to prepare. Every ship we've destroyed has weakened their overall force. And now they're committing everything to this attack because they have to. We've made ourselves too dangerous to ignore. Understanding dawned across the command center. They had accomplished something unprecedented. They had forced the swarm to abandon its usual tactics of infiltration and gradual consumption. This was to be a direct confrontation, something the swarm typically avoided. "Signal the fleet," Zira commanded. "All ships to formation Delta 7. The Valiant will take point. And send one last message to Central Command. Swarm committed to full engagement at Proxima. Executing final defense protocols." As her orders were carried out, Zira noticed something odd on the tactical display. Those unusual quantum signatures were still present, now registering from multiple points around the system's edge. Whatever they were, they'd have to wait. The swarm fleet was approaching weapons range. "All batteries, prepare to fire on my mark," she ordered, watching as the enemy fleet drew closer. The swarm ships moved with their characteristic precision, their biological vessels shifting and adapting their formation in response to the collective's defensive positioning. Just as the first shots were about to be exchanged, Sensor Chief Vixta called out again. "Commander, those quantum signatures, they're intensifying. Something's happening." Zira split her attention between the approaching swarm fleet and the mysterious readings. Whatever was causing those signatures had chosen an interesting moment to reveal itself. As she watched, the tactical display began registering new contacts emerging from what appeared to be crude tiers in spacetime itself. The ships that appeared were unlike anything in the collective's database. Their design was almost painfully asymmetrical, their energy signatures chaotic and inefficient. Yet there was something about their positioning, their immediate movement upon entering the system, that spoke of careful planning and tactical awareness. Unknown vessels emerging across all sectors, Vixta reported, her crystal matrix vibrating with excitement. Count now at 50. No, 70. Continuing to increase. They're forming up into attack positions. Before Zira could process this new development, a communication request came through on all frequencies, broadcast in simple electromagnetic waves rather than the quantum entanglement channels used by the collective. The message was brief, transmitted in a format so primitive it took their systems several seconds to decode it. "Collective Defense Station. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Sorry we're late to the party. Mind if we join in?" Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the EDF Hyperion, watching the tactical display with practiced calm. The massive hologram showed two distinct fleet formations, the crystalline ships of the collective arranged in a defensive sphere around their station, and the organic-looking vessels of the swarm spreading out in attack patterns that seemed to defy conventional military logic. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tension pervading the bridge. Captain Rodriguez, her tactical officer, responded immediately. 78 ships successfully translated into real space. No casualties from the jump. All ships reporting ready status. The swarm fleet hasn't altered their approach vector. They either haven't noticed us or they're choosing to ignore us. They'll notice soon enough. Chen's lips curved in a slight smile. "Deploy according to Plan Echo. Let's show them why you don't ignore the new kids on the block." The human fleet began moving with practiced precision. Unlike the elegant crystalline ships of the collective or the organic flow of the swarm vessels, Earth's ships were brutally functional. Their hulls were studded with what appeared to be mining equipment, industrial tools, and various modifications that would make any traditional naval architect cringe. "Signal from the collective station," Communications Officer Park announced. "They're having trouble with our transmission protocols, working on compatibility." Chen nodded. The collective used quantum entanglement for communication, something Earth scientists were still struggling to fully understand. They'd known this would be an issue, which was why they'd prepared alternative methods. Send visual signals, old school. Morse if you have to. Let them know we're friendly and to hold their fire. The last thing we need is to get shot by the people we're here to help. The bridge crew worked efficiently, each person focused on their tasks. Earth had been watching this war from the shadows for months, gathering intelligence and preparing. They'd known they'd only get one chance to make their entrance count. Admiral Rodriguez called out, "The swarm fleet is adjusting formation. They're splitting their forces. Looks like they're trying to account for our presence while maintaining pressure on the collective." Chen studied the tactical display. The swarm ships were indeed adapting, their biological vessels moving with an unsettling fluidity. But there was something about their movement that caught her attention. "They're overextending," she muttered, then louder. "All ships, prepare to execute Maneuver Theta 6. Engineering, status on the gravity wells." Chief Engineer Patel's voice came through clear and confident. "Modified mining equipment is ready. Admiral. Gravitational distortion fields are charged and stable, though I still think this is crazy." "Noted, Chief. Sometimes crazy is exactly what we need." Chen turned to her communications officer. "Any response from the collective?" "Yes, Admiral. They're requesting tactical coordination data. Their commander, someone named Zurak, wants to know our combat capabilities." Chen's smile widened slightly. "Send them the basic package we prepared. Let's not show all our cards just yet." The tactical display updated as the swarm fleet continued its approach. Their ships moved in complex patterns that seemed almost choreographed, each vessel perfectly synchronized with its neighbors. It was beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. "Admiral." Rodriguez spoke up, his voice tense. "Analysis of swarm movement patterns confirms our earlier intelligence. They're operating on a distributed consciousness network. Each ship is connected to every other ship, sharing information and responding as a single entity. Which makes them incredibly coordinated," Chen noted, "but also predictable. They can't help but move in optimal patterns. They literally can't comprehend choosing a suboptimal approach." She straightened her uniform. "And that's exactly what we're going to do. All ships, execute Theta 6 on my mark." The bridge crew tensed. Theta 6 was one of the many maneuvers they'd practiced, but never in actual combat. It went against every principle of space warfare, which is exactly why Chen had chosen it. "Signal from the collective," Park announced. They're asking if we're sure about our positioning. They say our formation is tactically unsound and offers to provide correct tactical algorithms." Several crew members stifled laughs. Chen allowed herself a small chuckle. "Tell them to watch and learn. Sometimes the worst position tactically is the best position strategically. Execute Theta 6. Now." The human fleet suddenly broke formation, their ships moving in seemingly random patterns. To an outside observer, it would appear as if Earth's fleet had suddenly lost all coordination. Ships moved in contradictory directions, creating gaps in their defense and leaving themselves apparently vulnerable. The swarm reacted exactly as Chen had predicted. Their ships immediately moved to exploit the perceived weaknesses, their perfect tactical algorithms unable to resist such obvious opportunities. "They're taking the bait," Rodriguez reported. "Swarm fleet is adjusting course to attack our exposed flanks. Their formation is stretching thin to compensate for our dispersal." "Perfect." Chen's voice was calm but carried an edge of satisfaction. "All ships, activate gravity wells on my mark. Engineering, prepare for maximum power to distortion fields." The modified mining equipment they'd installed on their ships had seemed like a crazy idea to many. Using industrial gravity manipulators as weapons wasn't in any tactical manual. But Chen had seen something in the way the swarm ships moved, something that suggested their biological vessels might be more vulnerable to gravitational stress than conventional ships. "Swarm ships entering optimal range," Rodriguez announced. "Their forward elements are committed to the attack vectors." Now we see if our hypothesis was correct. Chen took a deep breath. All ships, activate gravity wells. Full power. Across the battlefield, dozens of human ships activated their modified mining equipment simultaneously. The industrial gravity manipulators, originally designed for breaking up asteroids, created overlapping fields of distorted space. The effect on the swarm ships was immediate and dramatic. The biological vessels, so graceful in their normal movement, suddenly found themselves caught in conflicting gravitational fields. Their organic hulls, optimized for flowing through normal space, began to distort under the unexpected stresses. "It's working," Rodriguez exclaimed. "Swarm ships are showing signs of structural stress. Their formation is breaking down." Through the tactical display, Chen watched as the perfect coordination of the swarm fleet began to falter. Their ships, trapped in the overlapping gravity wells, could no longer maintain their optimal positioning. The distributed consciousness that made them so effective in normal combat now worked against them, as the confusion of individual ships cascaded through their network. "Signal to collective forces," Chen ordered. "Tell them to target any ships that break free from our gravity wells. And someone get me a direct line to Commander Zurek. I think it's time we had a proper conversation about how humanity does warfare." As the battle continued to unfold, Chen couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Humanity had arrived late to this war, yes, but they used that time to study, to prepare, and to develop strategies that no one else would have considered. Sometimes, being the newcomers had its advantages. "Ma'am," Park called out, excitement in his voice. "Incoming transmission from the collective station. Commander Zurek wants to know where we learned to weaponize mining equipment." Chen smiled. "Tell her that's just the beginning. Humanity has a lot more surprises in store for the swarm. After all, we're just getting started." Commander Zurek's crystalline form pulsed with a mixture of amazement and disbelief as she watched the tactical display. The swarm fleet, which had seemed unstoppable mere hours ago, was now in disarray. Multiple enemy vessels writhed in the artificial gravity fields generated by the human ships, their biological hulls straining against forces they were never designed to resist. "Remarkable," she transmitted through the hastily established communication link. "Your species has weaponized industrial equipment in ways our tactical matrices never considered possible." Admiral Chen's holographic image smiled. The human commander's physical form was so different from the crystalline structure of Zurek's people, yet there was something familiar in her bearing, her confidence. "Sometimes the best weapon isn't a weapon at all, Commander. We learned that lesson early in our space development. The swarm is attempting to adapt." First Officer Nemri reported, his crystal matrix vibrating with urgency. "Their outer vessels are modifying their hull structure, becoming more resistant to gravitational distortion." "Expected," Chen responded. "They're a hive mind. They learn quickly. But that's exactly what we want them to do." She turned to someone off-screen, issued a quick order, then faced Zurek again. "Commander, how quickly can your ships modify their weapons to emit on frequency band Delta 79? Zurek consulted with her engineering chief through the crystal matrix. "Minutes at most, but that frequency would be largely ineffective against swarm bioarmor." "Trust me." Chen's smile took on a predatory edge. "They're about to make themselves vulnerable in a way they don't even realize." Understanding dawned across Zurek's facets. "Their hull adaptations, you're forcing them to prioritize gravity resistance over other defensive measures." "Exactly. The swarm thinks in optimization patterns. They can't help it. Force them to maximize one type of defense, and they must necessarily minimize others." Zurek completed the thought. Her tactical crystal pulsed with newfound respect for human strategic thinking. "All collective vessels, modify weapons to frequency Delta 79. Prepare to fire on my mark." The battle continued to evolve as the swarm struggled to counter the human gravity weapons. Their ships were indeed adapting, their biological hulls becoming denser, more rigid. But with each adaptation, They sacrificed the fluid movement and energy absorption that normally made them so formidable. Admiral, Zirok transmitted, the Valiant's reactor is showing increasing signs of instability. If we're going to execute a coordinated strike, it needs to be soon. Chen nodded. Agreed. But first, we need to bunch them up a bit more. Captain Rodriguez, initiate Protocol Omega. The human fleet suddenly began a series of maneuvers that, to Zirok's tactical systems, appeared completely chaotic. Ships moved in seemingly random directions, their gravity wells shifting and overlapping in patterns that defied conventional analysis. Commander, Nemri called out, his tone concerned, the human fleet formation. Our tactical matrices can't predict their movement patterns. We risk friendly fire if we attempt to coordinate. That's the point. Chen's voice carried a note of satisfaction. The swarm can't predict us either. Watch what happens when you introduce chaos into a system built on perfect order. The swarm fleet's response was remarkable. Their ships, unable to calculate optimal responses to the humans' erratic movements, began to cluster together. The hive mind, seeking safety and unity, was unconsciously herding its forces into a more concentrated formation. Now, Chen announced, while they're condensed, all ships, cut gravity wells on my mark. She paused for a moment, waiting as the swarm continued to bunch together. Mark. The artificial gravity fields disappeared instantly. The swarm ships, their hulls now optimized for resistance to gravitational distortion, suddenly found themselves without the very forces they had adapted to resist. All collective vessels, Zirok commanded, her crystal matrix resonating with battle energy, fire on frequency Delta 79. The combined firepower of the collective fleet struck the clustered swarm ships. Their modified hulls, stripped of their usual flexibility and energy dispersal capabilities, absorbed the full force of the attack. Multiple vessels began to break apart, their biological components unable to maintain structural integrity. Phase 2, Chen ordered. All ships, deploy the converter drones. Hundreds of small objects launched from the human vessels. At first, Zirok thought they were missiles, but her sensors showed something far more interesting. The objects were carrying minimal explosive payload, instead housing complex electromagnetic field generators. What are those? She asked, curiosity overwhelming protocol. Something we cooked up after studying swarm communication patterns, Chen explained. Their hive mind relies on quantum-level signal transmission between ships. These drones emit fields that disrupt those signals, but only at very close range. Individually, they're not much threat. But with the swarm fleet clustered together, Zirok's tactical crystal blazed with appreciation of the strategy. The drones swarmed through the enemy fleet. Wherever they went, swarm ships began to move erratically, their perfect coordination breaking down as their neural network was disrupted. Ships collided. Formation patterns dissolved into chaos, and the once unified attack deteriorated into individual units acting without central control. Remarkable, Nemri transmitted. You've turned their greatest strength into a weakness. Without their neural network, they're just big, clumsy biological ships. Chen finished. And speaking of big ships, Commander Zirok, I believe your Valiant still has some fight left in her. Zirok's form pulsed with renewed energy. Indeed, Admiral. Shall we show the swarm how our species coordinate when we work together? I thought you'd never ask. All Earth forces, clear a path to the enemy command ship. Let's give our crystalline friends a clear shot at their leadership node. As human and collective ships moved into their new attack pattern, Zirok felt something she hadn't experienced since the war began. Hope. These humans, with their impossible tactics and repurposed industrial equipment, had changed everything. The swarm had expected to find a weakened, isolated defender at Proxima. Instead, they had found humanity. All ships, Zirok commanded, her voice carrying through both the crystal matrix and human communication channels, prepare for final assault phase. Today, we show the swarm what happens when they underestimate the combined strength of our peoples. The battle was far from over, but its course had been irrevocably altered. The hunters had become the hunted, and the swarm was about to learn a harsh lesson about the dangers of assuming technological superiority equated to tactical supremacy. The Valiant's engines burned bright against the darkness of space, its crystalline hull reflecting the chaos of battle around it. Inside the massive ship's command center, Commander Zurek coordinated with Admiral Chen through their makeshift communications link, while both fleets pressed their advantage against the disrupted swarm forces. Approaching optimal firing position, Zurek announced, her crystalline form pulsing with combat readiness. Though I must admit, Admiral, I'm still uncertain about this slingshot maneuver your people proposed. Chen's holographic image showed her characteristic confident smile. Trust in physics, Commander. Your ship's crystalline structure can handle the gravitational stress better than any vessel in either fleet. We've done the math. The math, yes, Zurek's own tactical crystal pulsed with what might have been amusement. Though I suspect no collective ship has ever attempted to use concentrated gravity wells as a propulsion assist before. First time for everything, Chen responded. All Earth ships prepare gravity well projectors for synchronized burst. Timing has to be perfect on this. Around the Valiant, human vessels moved into position. Their modified mining equipment, already proven effective at disrupting swarm formations, was about to be used in an entirely new way. The plan was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. Enemy command ship attempting to restore neural network coherence. First Officer Nemri reported, they're adapting to our disruption drones, developing localized quantum shielding. As expected, Chen's voice remained steady. They can't help but optimize their defenses. But every resource they devote to quantum shielding is one they can't use for conventional defense. Commander Zurek, is your primary weapon configured according to specifications? The crystalline commander interfaced directly with her ship's systems through the neural matrix. The Valiant's main cannon, normally tuned to emit devastating energy beams, had been modified according to human suggestions. The changes seemed counterintuitive, even primitive by collective standards, but Chen had been right about everything else so far. Weapon modifications complete, Zurek confirmed. Though using our primary energy projector to create what you call a shotgun effect seems inefficient. Chen finished, grinning. Sometimes efficiency isn't the goal. Sometimes you just need to hit the enemy with something they've never seen before. Her expression turned serious. All ships execute maneuver on my mark. Commander, your timing will need to be perfect. The Valiant accelerated toward its target, its crystalline hull humming with power. Around it, human ships maintained their precise formation. Their gravity well projectors aimed to create a corridor of warped space, leading directly to the swarm command ship. Mark. Multiple gravity wells activated simultaneously, creating a tunnel of distorted spacetime. The Valiant, its engines at full power, entered the gravitational corridor. Physics took over as the massive ship was caught in the overlapping fields, its velocity increasing far beyond what its engines alone could achieve. Hull stress approaching theoretical limits, Nemri reported, his crystal matrix vibrating with tension. Structural integrity holding, but we're pushing the boundaries of our design specifications. Maintain course, Zurek commanded. Through the crystal matrix, she could feel her ship straining against forces it was never meant to endure. But she could also feel something else, a sense of exhilaration that came from attempting something truly unprecedented. The swarm command ship grew larger in their viewport, its biological hull still struggling to maintain cohesion under the effects of the disruption drones. Its quantum shielding flickered with energy as it fought to restore control over its fleet, leaving other defensive systems weakened. Approaching weapon range, Zurek announced. Energy levels at maximum. Remember, Chen's voice carried across the command channel. You'll only get one shot at this. The modified weapon spread needs to hit their command node directly. The Valiant continued to accelerate through the gravity well corridor, approaching speeds that would have torn any normal ship apart. Its crystalline structure, designed to channel and amplify energy, now served to distribute the enormous stresses across its entire hull. Target locked, Nemri called out. Command node identified. Firing solution computed. All ships prepare to cut gravity wells on my mark, Chen ordered. Commander Zurich, it's your show now. Time seemed to slow as they approached the critical moment. The swarm command ship loomed before them, its massive form finally beginning to react to the threat. But it was too late. Now, Chen commanded. The gravity wells disappeared instantly. The Valiant, released from the gravitational corridor at precisely the right moment, shot forward like a crystal arrow. Its modified main weapon, powered by the excess energy accumulated during the slingshot maneuver, unleashed its payload. Instead of the usual concentrated energy beam, the weapon released a spread of smaller, concentrated packets, the shotgun effect the humans had suggested. The multiple energy bursts struck the swarm command ship simultaneously, overwhelming its weakened conventional shields and striking its command node from multiple angles. The effect was catastrophic. The swarm vessel's biological hull, already stressed from maintaining quantum shielding, began to break apart. More importantly, its command node, the central processor for the entire fleet's neural network, suffered critical damage. Direct hit. Nemri's crystal matrix pulsed with excitement. Enemy command node is destabilizing. Neural network connectivity dropping across all swarm vessels. Through the tactical display, Zurich watched as the effects cascaded through the enemy fleet. Without their central coordination, the swarm ships began to move erratically. Some went completely dormant, while others fired their weapons randomly, occasionally hitting their own allies. All ships, execute cleanup protocols, Chen ordered. Target any vessels still showing signs of coordinated behavior. Don't let them establish secondary command nodes. As both fleets moved to eliminate the remaining threat, Zurich allowed her crystal matrix to pulse with an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Triumph. Against all odds, they had not only survived but achieved what countless battles and conventional tactics had failed to do. They had struck a decisive blow against the swarm. Admiral Chen, she transmitted, I believe I owe you and your species an apology. When you first arrived, I thought your tactics seemed primitive. Chen's holographic image showed her widest smile yet. No apology needed, Commander. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones that seem obvious in hindsight. Besides, she added, watching as the combined fleets methodically eliminated the remaining swarm resistance, I'd say the results speak for themselves. 3 days after the battle, the space around Proxima Station still glittered with debris from destroyed swarm vessels. Through the station's main viewport, Commander Zurich watched as human and collective ships worked together to clear the larger pieces, their crews already comfortable cooperating despite their vast technological differences. Remarkable how quickly they adapt, she observed to Admiral Chen, who stood beside her in her physical form for the first time. The human was shorter than Zurich had expected, but carried herself with the same confidence her hologram had projected. It's what we do best, Chen replied, watching as an Earth cargo ship used its modified mining equipment to carefully move a crystalline hull fragment away from high-traffic lanes. Humanity has always excelled at making the best of any situation. The door to the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss, admitting First Officer Nemri and Captain Rodriguez. Both carried data crystals containing the latest analysis of the battle's aftermath. Final reports are in, Rodriguez announced, his dark eyes bright with satisfaction. The swarm fleet has been completely neutralized. No signs of neural network activity detected anywhere in the sector. More importantly, the quantum disruption seems to have created a cascading effect through their communication channels. Other swarm fleets across 3 sectors are showing signs of coordination breakdown. Zurich's crystal matrix pulsed with hope. They're losing their unity. Without the central command node we destroyed. They're reverting to individual units, Chen finished. Still dangerous, but no longer the coordinated force they once were. The collective can handle isolated swarm vessels. Speaking of the collective, Nemri interjected, his own crystal structure vibrating with excitement. We finally received a response from Central Command. Well, perhaps you should see for yourself. He inserted his data crystal into a nearby terminal. The holographic display showed a message that made Zirak's entire form pulse with surprise. "They're promoting you to Fleet Commander," Chen observed, reading the translated text, "and requesting formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Looks like someone finally noticed us." "Not just diplomatic relations," Zirak corrected, her tactical crystal glowing brightly. "They're requesting technological exchange programs, joint military exercises, and the establishment of permanent human presence in collective space." She turned to face Chen directly. "Your arrival has changed everything, Admiral. Not just the outcome of this battle, but potentially the future of both our species." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "We had hoped for something like this. Earth's been watching the war for months, you know. Learning, preparing, developing countermeasures. We knew we couldn't match the collective's technology level or the swarm's biological advantages, so we had to find our own way to contribute." By turning mining equipment into weapons, Rodriguez added with a grin, "and using primitive faster-than-light drives that confuse the enemy sensors, and basically ignoring every conventional tactical doctrine in existence." "Which is exactly what we needed," Zirak stated firmly. "The collective has existed for millennia, gathering knowledge, advancing technology. But somewhere along the way, we became predictable. We forgot how to think beyond our established paradigms. And then humanity shows up," Nemri added, his crystal matrix pulsing with what might have been amusement, using gravity wells as projectile accelerators and turning industrial equipment into combat systems. "The swarm never saw it coming because we never saw it coming." "That's what humans do," Chen said simply. "We adapt. We improvise. We look at problems from angles no one else considers." And now, she gestured to the viewport where ships of both species continued their cleanup operation. "We can share that perspective with the collective." A new alert chimed softly from the terminal. Another message from Central Command, this one marked with highest priority encryption. Zirak interfaced with the system through her crystal matrix, her form brightening as she processed the contents. "They've detected multiple swarm fleets attempting to regroup in the Antares sector," she announced. "Without their neural network, they're falling back on more primitive communication methods. Central Command wants us to lead the response." "Us?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "Both of us," Zirak clarified. "They want a joint human collective task force, combining our species' strengths. They believe the swarm won't be able to adapt to our, what did you call it, Captain Rodriguez?" "Tactical insanity," he supplied with a laugh. "At least that's what my crew's been calling it." Speaking of insane tactics, Chen turned to face Zirak fully. "I had our engineers drawing up some new modifications during the cleanup. How do you feel about using your station's crystal matrix to amplify our gravity well effects? Theoretically, we could create a field large enough to..." As Chen outlined her latest unconventional proposal, Zirak felt her tactical crystal pulse with anticipation. This was what the collective had been missing, she realized. Not just new technology or different weapons, but an entirely new way of thinking about problems. The swarm had evolved to counter the collective's methodical, logical approach to warfare. They had never faced an enemy that would deliberately choose suboptimal tactics, that would repurpose civilian equipment into weapons, that would look at a mining tool and see a military advantage. They had never faced humanity. "Admiral," Zirak interrupted Chen's technical explanation, "I believe this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership." Chen smiled, that now familiar expression that suggested she was already thinking 3 moves ahead. "Commander, I couldn't agree more. Now, about those station modifications." Outside the viewport, human and collective ships continued their work, their crews already sharing stories and techniques across species boundaries. The debris of the swarm fleet glittered in Proxima's light, a reminder of what they had achieved together. The war wasn't over, but its course had changed irrevocably. Humanity had arrived late to the galactic conflict, but they had brought with them something more valuable than advanced technology or overwhelming numbers. They had brought innovation, adaptability, and an entirely new perspective on what was possible. And in doing so, they had changed everything.